Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The Alabama Crimson Tide making some noise in the transfer portal, landing one of the more coveted defensive linemen available in former Texas A&M defensive lineman LT Overton. And this is a guy that, if you've been following the high school recruiting cycle for the last couple of years, LT Overton is a name you know. And this is a guy that reclassified into that 2022 year from 2023, was the former number one overall recruit in the 2023 class, reclassifies to 2022, still a five-star guy, heads to Texas A&M, and largely has been underwhelming during his first 2 years at Texas A&M. And if you're looking at LT Overton and saying, what is the perfect spot for LT Overton to wind up at? I couldn't think of a better landing spot than the Alabama Crimson Tide. Like getting him into that system, getting him into the strength room, getting him into that player development cycle for Alabama. This is a perfect fit. You're getting a guy that, again, you're not excited about what the player is right now. You're excited about what this player can be in 6, 8, 12 months in this Alabama program. A massive get for the Crimson Tide, a position group where that's where they make their money, right? Alabama and the success they've had is because they dominate the line of scrimmage, and LT Overton is certainly a guy, given the right development, that can be one of those dominant pieces for Alabama up front. You can never have enough of those guys, and you can never have enough impact guys like what LT Overton can be. Perfect fit for me. Want to get into LT Overton, talk a little bit about his career path, and then give a little update to Alabama on the high school recruiting trail, because if you follow Twitter, you follow the message boards, it sounds like Alabama is going to be making some moves right before signing day, as they kind of normally do. Now, before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys. There has been just a phenomenal amount of support as we've covered the transfer portal. Try to cover as many of these transfer portal moves as we can. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. And without further ado, let's get into LT Overton. And the first thing I want to talk about is that reclassification year. I think not enough people are talking about. In terms of development on the defensive line, you rarely see first-year guys at the college football level come in and dominate on the defensive line, especially in the SEC. And obviously, LT Overton hasn't come in and dominated. It's important to recognize that this was a guy that should be, from a physical maturing standpoint, just be finishing up his true freshman year at the college football level. Now, the fact that he reclassified, he came into Texas A&M young. And that 1 year of high school development, he missed out at. So you're looking at, okay, it's been 2 years and he hasn't really scratched the surface of kind of reaching that potential. It starts to make a little bit more sense when you realize he reclassified from that 2023 class. He should have been coming in with guys like Caden Proctor and Keon Keeley. Instead, he came in a year before. And so I wouldn't be writing a guy like LT Overton off because he hasn't necessarily hit in the first 2 years of his college football career. And what excites you even more is, there's not a better program for LT Overton. I'm telling you, this seems like a perfect fit in terms of him realizing his potential of what he can be as a defensive lineman. Let's be quite frank about it. The reason Jimbo Fisher is not coaching Texas A&M anymore is that player development was not great, right? You saw the getting the talent acquisition side of things for Texas A&M was certainly not the problem. The problem was development. And what we want to know, a program that doesn't have that problem is the Alabama Crimson Tide, specifically on that defensive line. So you get LT Overton into this program. You get him in that player development cycle. You get him in the Alabama weight room. This is a guy that the player that you're getting right now could be completely different to a player that we see to start the 2024 year. And I think that's what has a lot of college football fans, specifically Alabama fans, really excited about this guy. There is a reason he was one of the more coveted defensive linemen in the transfer portal, because a lot of college coaches and a lot of college football programs were looking at a guy like LT Overton the same way Nick Saban was, and saying, this is a guy that has a ton of untapped potential. We can get him into this program, have him realize this potential, and he's a difference maker on that defensive line, all SEC, all-American caliber defensive lineman that the Alabama Crimson Tide get. And another story to this is, Alabama's made their money on depth at the defensive line spot, and being able to rotate a ton of guys in who are difference makers up front. LT Overton just adds to that cog and machine of just difference makers for Alabama along that defensive line. Those guys are big bodies. You want to keep them fresh, not only for 12 games, but also for 4 quarters. And having a guy like LT Overton, who's going to come in and be a role player at the very least for Alabama, certainly a massive get. Now, I want to update and just talk a little bit about what Alabama is doing on the recruiting trail as well, because you saw when Alabama, and this is we got on and said this week 3, week 4, like we've learned time and time again not to doubt Nick Saban, and people are going to continue to do it. And when Nick Saban and this Alabama Crimson Tide team were struggling in week 2, week 3, week 4, a lot of people were saying Nick Saban's lost his fastball. College football maybe has passed Nick Saban by. And then they looked at the recruiting trail and saw, hey, Alabama's not even in the top 5 of recruiting. Well, you take a look back up. They're top 4. You have Ryan Williams obviously reclassify into this 2024 cycle. And it sounds like Alabama's not done. And Nick Saban's a closer. Like when it comes time to sign that dotted line, Nick Saban in this Alabama program, it's a program that's hard to say no to. So you look at this class right now, it's a very loaded class, top 5 in the country, number 4 sitting. And there's some guys that Alabama's looking to close on to get back into that top 3, which you almost normally always see Alabama, right? The first guy I'm taking a look at is Kevin Riley, one of the top running backs in this 2024 cycle, committed to the Miami Hurricanes. And for those who don't necessarily follow outside of Alabama recruiting, Miami just landed another running back last night. And so the perspective and the scope of Kevin Riley flipping to Alabama, and it makes sense, he's an Alabama kid, is starting to seem like more and more of a possibility and more of like that's what's going to happen. So Kevin Riley, one of the top running backs in that class, potentially joining Alabama in this 2024 class. And you look at the young running back room with guys like Justice Haynes and Richard Young, and then you add a guy like Kevin Riley. You're excited about that young running back room. And then going back to that defensive line, I mean, Edric Houston, committed to Ohio State right now, takes a visit to Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide this weekend. And it sounds like Alabama's put themselves in a pretty good spot to potentially flip a guy like Edric Houston too. So you're looking at 2 top 100 national players that could be signing with Alabama in the next 24 hours. And you suddenly look up at this Alabama class and say, yep, that looks like the classic Alabama Nick Saban signed class that we all expect them to sign. And there's a couple other names that you're starting to hear some rumblings about as well. So we'll keep you guys updated with that. But to kind of round this out, this is an Alabama team, going back to the transfer portal discussion, that they don't need to go and sign 20, 25 players in the transfer portal because they recruit at this level. And I don't even know if there's 20, 25 guys available in the transfer portal that will truly be difference makers for this Alabama team. And that just speaks to the talent, the young talent that Alabama has. And so how Alabama uses the transfer portal is to get a guy like LT Overton, who has a ton of potential, and you think that you can get that potential out of him, or going out and getting a veteran guy to kind of fill in some cracks in the depth chart like you saw them do in the secondary last cycle in the transfer portal. Alabama's not going to bring 25 guys in because they don't need to. They're going to be competitive in 2024 regardless of the transfer portal. They're just using the transfer portal to kind of supplement this roster, but make no mistake about it, Alabama, Nick Saban, they build this roster through the high school classes. And that's the recipe that's worked for Alabama. It's going to continue to work for Alabama. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. Wanted to hop on, talk about a guy that I am extremely excited about coming to Tuscaloosa. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the event, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all